The K9 had been moving steadily through the farmhouse, nose to the floor, tail low, every step measured. But when they reached the narrow hallway at the back, he stopped so abruptly the leash went slack. His head tilted upward toward the attic door, ears rigid, eyes unblinking. And then, through the silence, a child's voice floated down, barely a whisper. "Don't let him know I'm here." The farmhouse had been abandoned for years, at least, that's what the deputy had told them on the drive out. The front porch sagged under its own weight, shingles scattered in the dead grass like forgotten playing cards. A pale winter sun hung low in the sky, casting thin light through a veil of drifting clouds. Inside, the air was colder than outside, heavy with the smell of dust and something faintly metallic. The old boards creaked beneath each step, and even though the search team had been in countless derelict buildings before, this one felt different. She kept her grip steady on Rook's leash, the full black K9 moving with slow, deliberate steps ahead of her. His nose skimmed the floorboards, pausing occasionally to test the air. He didn't pull, didn't rush, just methodically cleared each corner before moving on. That was how he worked, calm, calculated, unstoppable once he had a scent. They had come here looking for a missing 9-year-old girl named Lily. She'd vanished 2 days ago from a nearby rural community. The only clue had been a set of small footprints found near the tree line, heading toward this stretch of land. Most of the properties here were empty, but the farmhouse was the closest structure. The rest of the search team fanned out behind her, Deputy Harris taking the left rooms, Officer Kemp covering the rear entry. The wind rattled loose shutters somewhere upstairs, but otherwise, the house was quiet. "Anything?" Harris's voice carried from the parlor. "Not yet," she replied, keeping her voice low. Rook turned down a narrow hallway toward the back of the house. It was darker here, the only light coming from a single window coated in years of grime. The wallpaper hung in strips, curling at the edges, revealing the cracked plaster underneath. At the end of the hall was a narrow staircase, steep, almost ladder-like, leading up to the attic. The hatch at the top was closed, a rusty latch holding it in place. Rook slowed. Her hand tightened on the leash instinctively. "What is it, boy?" He stopped completely. No sniffing, no shifting of weight. Just still. His head lifted, eyes fixed on the attic door, ears forward. She'd worked with him long enough to know this wasn't hesitation. This was focus, the kind he showed when he knew exactly where the source was but needed to confirm it. The air in the hallway felt heavier somehow. She heard her own breath in the quiet, the soft tick of something, maybe the baseboard heating expanding, though the place hadn't seen heat in years. Then it happened. A voice. Small. Weak. Floating down through the wood and dust between them. "Don't let him know I'm here." She froze. The sound was so faint she thought for a moment she'd imagined it. But Rook's ears twitched, his tail stiffening. His eyes didn't leave the attic door. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Lily," she called softly. Silence. She glanced back down the hall, catching Harris's shape moving toward her, his brow furrowed. "What?" "I heard her." Her voice shook despite herself. "You're sure?" Rook gave a low, almost imperceptible whine, not out of distress, but acknowledgement. Harris's jaw tightened. "Stay there. I'll get Kemp." As his footsteps retreated, she kept her eyes on the attic door. Her grip on the leash was light now, she knew Rook wouldn't move without her command. The house seemed to settle around them. A board popped somewhere upstairs. Dust drifted lazily through the narrow shaft of light from the window. The cold pressed against her skin through her jacket. Another sound. This time it was softer, a shift, like fabric sliding against wood. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Lily, it's okay. We're here to help." Nothing. The latch at the top of the stairs looked fragile, the kind that could be opened with a single sharp pull. She considered going up, but something in her gut told her to wait. When Harris returned with Kemp, both men carried their flashlights angled low. "We secure it first," Harris said. "No surprises." Rook's body remained tense, his gaze unwavering. The dog didn't bark, and that was the part that unsettled her the most. He barked at threats. He was silent when something fragile was near. She clipped her flashlight to her vest, freeing her hands. "If she's in there, we need to get her out now." "Agreed," Harris said. He started up the steps cautiously, each one groaning under his weight. Rook's nose lifted slightly, catching something in the air, the scent drawing his attention even more sharply. She knew that look. There was someone in that attic. Harris took the narrow steps slowly, his boots pressing down on wood that groaned like it hadn't been touched in decades. Each sound echoed faintly in the cramped hallway, making the space feel even tighter. Kemp stood at the base of the stairs, his flashlight sweeping over the cracked plaster walls as though something could emerge from them. Rook didn't move an inch. His eyes stayed locked on the attic door, his breathing slow but deliberate, every muscle in his frame pulled taut. She could feel the tension through the leash, not pulling, not lunging, but ready. Halfway up, Harris paused. He glanced down at her. "No movement, but I can hear something shifting up there. Light. Like fabric." "That's what I heard earlier," she said quietly. He nodded once, then reached the top. His gloved hand rested on the latch for a second before he tried it. It didn't budge. Rust clung to the edges, but it wasn't locked from the outside. "She'd have to hold it shut if she's keeping us out," Harris murmured. "Or someone else could be holding it shut from the other side." The thought struck her hard enough to make her skin prickle. "Lily?" Harris called gently through the wood. "It's the sheriff's office. You're safe. Can you open the door for me?" Silence. Then, barely audible, "He'll hear me." Her breath caught. Rook's ears pressed forward so sharply they almost quivered. "Who?" Harris asked carefully. The answer came after a long pause, each word drawn out like it hurt to say them. "The man. He's here." Kemp and Harris exchanged a glance. Kemp's voice was a low mutter. "That's not good." "Okay, Lily," Harris said in the calm tone you'd use to coax a frightened animal from hiding. "You don't have to open the door. Just tell me, is he in there with you?" No answer. Harris turned to her. "We can't wait." "If she's not alone," he didn't finish the sentence. She unclipped Rook's leash and stepped aside. The dog didn't move at first, his head tilted, eyes locked on the attic door, reading the air like he was trying to piece together every layer of scent. Then, without warning, he took one slow step forward. Another. His paws landed softly on the first rung of the steep staircase. Harris pressed himself to the side to give the dog room. Rook climbed silently, his head low, body balanced, every step measured. When he reached the top, he stood in front of the hatch, nose inches from the wood. He didn't bark. Didn't growl. Just froze again. From where she stood below, she could see his chest rise and fall slowly. His nose twitched, and then he turned his head slightly toward Harris, a look she'd seen before. That look meant, someone's inside. "Back up," Harris mouthed to Kemp, and the man stepped back a pace, flashlight beam steady on the door. "On my go," Harris said, gripping the latch. Rook's muscles bunched. 1. The wood creaked faintly. 2. Something tapped against the other side of the door, soft, almost like fingers. 3. Harris yanked the latch hard. The rusted metal screeched, and the door swung up just a crack before something on the other side resisted. Rook lunged forward, not attacking but pushing his nose and shoulders against the gap. Harris shoved hard, the door giving way with a groan. A gust of stale, cold air spilled down the staircase. The beam of Harris's flashlight cut into the dark attic, landing first on a pile of old boxes. Dust swirled in the sudden movement. And then, movement in the far corner. She saw her. A girl, small and pale, crouched beside a wooden trunk. Her knees were pulled tight to her chest, her hair a tangled mess. Wide eyes reflected the light for just a second before she shielded her face. "It's okay, Lily," Harris said quickly, crouching as much as the cramped attic allowed. "We're here to help." Rook didn't move from the doorway. He stood like a sentry, head slightly turned toward the far corner, not at the girl, but at the shadow behind the trunk. "Is someone else in here?" Harris asked softly. The girl shook her head, but her eyes flicked toward the shadow again. And that's when Rook's growl started, low, deep, not for the girl, but for whatever was hiding where the flashlight hadn't reached yet. The air in the attic felt thick, colder than the rest of the house. Dust motes swirled in the beam of Harris's flashlight, catching in her throat as she stepped up onto the last rung. She stayed low, careful not to crowd Rook, who was still fixed on that same dark corner. "Lily," she said gently, keeping her voice low and steady, "it's all right. You're safe now." The girl's eyes darted toward her for the briefest moment before snapping back to the shadow. She didn't move from her crouch. Harris shifted his beam toward the corner, the light spilling across stacked boxes, an old quilt draped over something large. The fabric moved, just slightly, but enough to make the hair rise on her arms. "Come out," Harris said sharply. No answer. Rook's growl deepened, his lips pulling back just enough to show the edges of his teeth. He wasn't lunging, just holding position like a wall between the girl and whatever was behind that quilt. "I said," Harris started, but then a shape emerged. It wasn't the man they were expecting. A boy, maybe 15, thin to the point of looking ill, with greasy hair falling into his eyes, crawled out from behind the boxes. He kept one hand up as though shielding himself from the light. "Don't," Lily whispered, the word trembling. The boy squinted at them. "She doesn't want to go." "That's not your choice," Harris said, his voice clipped. "Step away from her." The boy's gaze flicked to Rook, then to her, then back to Lily. "You don't know what's out there. If he finds her." "We're not here to debate," Harris cut in. Something about the boy's words prickled in her mind, "if he finds her." He wasn't talking about himself. "Who?" she asked quietly. "Who's coming?" The boy's mouth opened, then shut again. "Doesn't matter. You won't stop him." Rook took a step forward, just enough to make the boy flinch back. Harris gestured with his flashlight. "Move away from the corner, kid. Now." The boy's jaw tightened, but he shuffled to the side. Lily didn't follow him, she stayed pressed against the trunk, eyes wide, one hand gripping the wood so tightly her knuckles were white. "Lily," she said again, crouching lower so she was on the girl's level. "We're going to take you somewhere safe. No one's going to hurt you." The girl shook her head almost violently. "He'll be mad." "Who?" She didn't answer, her gaze shifted to the attic window, a small pane of warped glass that looked out over the backfield. A shadow moved there. It was faint, but she saw it, the outline of a man passing between the window and the trees beyond. Rook's head whipped toward it instantly. His growl changed, sharper now, urgent. Harris followed his gaze and swore under his breath. "We need to move." The boy stepped forward. "If you take her, he'll follow you." "That's fine," Harris said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Better he comes for us than stays here with you two in the dark." The girl's small hands tightened on the trunk, her breathing shallow. She reached out slowly. "Lily, trust me." For a moment, it seemed like the girl might refuse. Then, slowly, she crawled toward her, never taking her eyes off the window. Rook backed down the stairs first, moving in reverse so he could keep his gaze locked on the attic. Harris followed, his flashlight sweeping the space one last time before he lowered the hatch. The boy stayed behind. He didn't call out, didn't try to follow. Just watched them go, his expression unreadable. They reached the hallway, the air somehow even colder now. Lily pressed herself close to her leg, her thin frame trembling. Harris adjusted his grip on the shotgun slung over his shoulder. Front door. Now. But Rook didn't move toward the front. He turned down the side hallway instead, ears still pricked, his nose working the air. "What is it, boy?" she murmured, but he was already at the side window, staring out toward the treeline. The same shadow. Closer this time. Rook's body went completely still at the side window, his head lowered, ears rigid. His breath fogged the glass in short bursts as he stared into the trees. She stepped closer, careful to stay out of his line of sight. The shadow outside shifted again, not just a passing figure this time. Whoever it was had stopped. They were standing at the edge of the clearing, their outline barely visible through the tangle of bare winter branches. "Movement outside," she said quietly to Harris. He crossed the hall in 3 quick strides, raising the flashlight but keeping it off. He peered over Rook's shoulder, then let out a low curse under his breath. "He's just watching. Not moving closer." "That's worse," Kemp said from behind them, his voice tight. "Means he's thinking." Lily was pressed against the wall now, her small hands gripping the hem of her sweater. She hadn't said a word since they'd come down from the attic, but her eyes were locked on that window like she knew exactly who was out there. "Is that him?" she asked in a whisper. "Yes," Lily murmured, so soft it was almost lost in the sound of the wind scraping a loose shutter. That one word made Rook's growl return, deep, resonant, vibrating through the floorboards. Harris stepped back from the window. "All right. We're not letting him dictate the pace. Kemp, cover the back. We'll move her to the car now." The girl shook her head violently. "No. He'll see us. He'll get me." "You'll be fine," Harris said firmly. "We've got you." But she wasn't convinced, her feet stayed rooted to the spot. The officer knelt to her level, softening his tone. "You've got 3 of us here, and Rook. Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. But staying in here with him outside isn't safe." Rook stepped away from the window now, moving to stand between Lily and the hallway leading to the front door. His gaze kept flicking back toward the glass, but his body language had changed, he was preparing to move. "Go," Harris ordered. They moved fast. She took Lily's hand and guided her down the narrow hallway, Harris leading, Kemp falling in behind them. Rook kept pace at Lily's side, matching her step for step. The front room felt even colder than the rest of the house. Frost had crept up the inside of the window panes, curling in delicate patterns that caught the thin winter light. The front door stood ahead, its paint peeling in long strips. Harris reached for the deadbolt, and froze. Footsteps. Right outside. Slow. Deliberate. They weren't on the porch yet, but close. Rook stopped instantly, his body angling toward the sound, tail stiff, shoulders raised. Harris stepped back from the door. "Change of plan," he said quietly. "Side exit." But before they could move, a knock came. It was soft. 3 evenly spaced raps, like a neighbor calling. Lily pressed into her side. "Don't open it," she whispered. Kemp's voice was barely audible. "He's not even pretending to leave now." The knock came again, slightly louder this time. Then a man's voice, calm and steady, "Lily. Time to come home." Every muscle in her body tensed. "No," Lily said, louder than she'd spoken yet. "I'm not going with you." The man didn't raise his voice. "You don't get to decide that." Rook stepped forward until his nose was inches from the door, his growl vibrating through the air like a low hum. Harris gestured them back. Kemp, watch the rear. We're not letting him box us in. They retreated into the hallway, moving quickly toward the kitchen where the side exit was. The air felt tighter the farther they got from the front door, like the house itself was holding its breath. When they reached the kitchen, Harris put a hand on the knob, then froze again. The sound of footsteps on frost came from the side yard. Whoever had been at the front was already here. Lily's grip on her hand tightened painfully. "He's everywhere," she whispered. "No," Harris said, his voice steady. "He's just fast. But we're faster." He pointed toward the narrow stairway that led down to the basement. "There's a cellar door that comes out at the back, we take that." They moved quickly. Rook stayed in the lead, his paws silent on the old steps. The air in the basement was damp and colder still, smelling faintly of earth and mildew. A thin shaft of daylight spilled in through the cracks around the cellar doors ahead. The soldier, Harris, reached the doors first and eased them open just enough to look outside. The yard beyond was clear, the tree line still and quiet. "Go," he said. They stepped out into the biting cold, Rook scanning the perimeter before trotting toward the waiting vehicle at the edge of the property. But halfway there, Lily stopped. Her gaze was fixed on the attic window high above them. A shadow stood there, unmoving, watching. The figure in the attic window didn't move, but the stillness was worse than if he had. The outline was too sharp to be a trick of the light, broad shoulders, a tilt of the head that suggested he was looking directly at them. Harris's voice was low, but it carried. "Keep moving." She took Lily's hand again and started toward the SUV. Rook didn't follow immediately, his eyes stayed locked on the attic window for 3 long seconds before he turned, walking backward to keep the sight line. They were halfway across the yard when the shadow shifted. It was subtle, like someone stepping back into the darkness. The glass caught one last glint of movement, and then it was empty. "Go," Harris urged. The SUV sat at the edge of the gravel drive, engine off, doors locked. Kemp moved ahead to unlock it, his eyes scanning the tree line and the farmhouse in alternating sweeps. "Rook, in," she said, opening the back door. The K9 leapt inside but stayed standing, his head out the open space between the seats, watching. She slid into the back beside Lily, who was staring at the floorboard like if she didn't look up, none of this would be real. Harris got behind the wheel, Kemp in the passenger seat. The engine coughed to life, the cold making the metal creak. Gravel crunched under the tires as they started forward. Then Lily spoke. "He's not in the attic anymore." It was the way she said it, not a guess, not a hope, but a certainty, that made the back of her neck prickle. She leaned closer. "How do you know?" The girl's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because he's in the house below us now." The words hit like a punch. Harris's hands tightened on the wheel, but he didn't slow. "We're not stopping to check." But Rook's head snapped toward the house just as they reached the main road. His body went rigid, ears locked forward. "Eyes on the right," Kemp said quickly. In the side mirror, the figure was visible again, stepping out onto the front porch of the farmhouse, watching the SUV pull away. No rush. No chase. Just watching. "Is that him?" Harris asked, though he already knew the answer. Lily didn't look. She just nodded once, her shoulders curling inward. They drove in silence for several miles, the winter fields stretching out on either side, bare and lifeless. Harris finally spoke. "We're going to the station first." "Lock it down, call her parents." But Lily shook her head. "He'll follow us there. He doesn't care about police." The girl's calm certainty was unsettling. She glanced at Harris. "She's not wrong. If he's been bold enough to show himself, he's not afraid of getting caught." "Then we make him afraid," Harris said. They turned off the main road onto a narrow lane, the trees pressing in again. Every turn felt like it could be the one where he stepped out into the path, blocking the way. When they reached the station, Harris didn't pull up to the front. He drove straight to the secured back entrance, where 2 other deputies were waiting. The moment the doors opened, Rook leapt out first, scanning the lot with a slow pivot of his head before stepping aside for Lily. Inside, the fluorescent lights and warm air should have felt like safety, but Lily's posture didn't change. She stayed close to Rook, one hand gripping the thick fur at his neck. The deputies ushered her into an interview room, but she refused to sit unless Rook was right beside her. Harris allowed it, and the big dog settled at her feet, eyes still alert even in the quiet room. She crouched to Lily's level. "You're safe now. We're going to keep you here until we know he can't get to you." The girl looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since they'd found her. "You don't understand. He's already here." Before she could respond, Rook's head lifted sharply, ears pricked toward the hallway. A second later, a muffled voice called from the front of the station. Kemp's voice came through the intercom, tight with tension. "We've got a situation at the front desk." Harris was already moving. "Stay with her," he ordered. She stayed, but Rook didn't take his eyes off the door. The radio on her vest crackled before she could even stand. Harris's voice came through, tight and clipped. "He's here." Her grip on the table's edge tightened. "At the front desk?" Came in calm, asking for her by name. Her eyes darted to Lily. The girl had already pulled her knees up to the chair, curling into herself. Rook was on his feet now, head high, his gaze locked on the interview room door like he could see straight through it. "Keep him out of here," she said into the radio, though she knew Harris didn't need to be told. There was movement in the hallway, quick, purposeful. One of the deputies stepped in, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered weapon. "We're locking down. Harris is stalling him, but he's not leaving. Says he won't go without the girl." "That's not happening," she said firmly. The deputy nodded and stepped aside so she could position herself between Lily and the door. Rook moved with her, taking a stance just ahead of her knees, his front paws slightly spread, shoulders forward, ears locked on the sound of voices outside. Through the door, muffled but clear enough, came a man's voice. "She's mine. You can't keep her here." Lily flinched like the words were a physical blow. The deputy leaned in closer. "We can move her out the back if we..." Rook's growl cut him off. It was low, vibrating through the floor. His head shifted slightly to the right, ears adjusting to the sound of footsteps approaching from the hall, not from the front desk, but from the side entrance. She realized it at the same time Rook did, there was more than one person here. "Side door," she said sharply into the radio. "Check the side door now." A burst of static, then Kemp's voice, "Too late. He's inside." Her stomach dropped. "Lock this room," she told the deputy. He reached for the door, but before the latch could turn, there was a knock. Not a hard one, slow, deliberate. 3 raps, evenly spaced. Lily's breathing went ragged. "That's him." The knock came again, followed by a soft, calm voice. "You can open the door, Lily. I told you I'd come." Rook's growl deepened, his tail lowering, the fur along his spine standing up like a ridge. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his back. His muscles were tight as steel. "You're not getting her," she said through the door. A pause. Then, in the same calm tone, "You think he'll protect you?" "He'll move when I tell him to." The words made her skin crawl, not because she believed them, but because of the certainty in his voice. From the radio, Harris's voice broke in. "We're moving on him now. Hold tight." She tightened her grip on Rook's harness, ready for whatever was about to happen. The hallway outside erupted in noise, the heavy tread of boots, a barked command, the sharp crack of something hitting the wall. The door shuddered under a sudden impact, but didn't open. Rook didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply waited, poised to act the second that door gave way. Then, silence. A heartbeat later, Harris's voice, "We've got him." Room's clear. She exhaled slowly, but didn't relax until the door opened and Harris stepped in, his jacket dusted with flecks of paint from the scuffle. "He's in holding," Harris said. "Claims he just came to talk." "Sure he did," she muttered. Lily was still curled in the chair, her eyes wide, her hand gripping Rook's collar. The dog sat beside her now, posture easing only slightly, but his gaze stayed on the door as if expecting it to open again. Harris crouched down to Lily's level. "You're safe for now. But we're going to take you somewhere he doesn't know about." Lily's voice was almost too quiet to hear. "He always knows." And the way she said it made everyone in the room go still. The decision was made in less than 5 minutes. They couldn't keep Lily in the station overnight. Harris arranged for an unmarked SUV, 2 armed deputies as backup, and a safe house location on the far edge of the county. The goal was to move quickly and quietly, before word could spread. She walked beside Lily down the back hallway, Rook on the opposite side like a living barrier. The girl's small hand stayed tangled in his fur, her steps quick but light, like she was trying not to make a sound. "Where are we going?" Lily asked. "Someplace warm and safe," she said. "No one will find you there." The girl's voice was almost a whisper. "He will." She didn't argue, there was no point trying to reason against a fear that deep. Instead, she kept her tone steady. "Not tonight." The SUV waited in the alley behind the station, engine running, exhaust curling into the cold air. Harris took the driver's seat, Kemp in the passenger side. She and Lily slid into the back, Rook climbing in last and sitting between them and the door. "Stay alert," Harris said over his shoulder as they pulled out. The streets were empty at this hour, the sodium lights casting long orange pools over patches of frost. The further they got from town, the darker it became. The sound of the tires over the asphalt and Rook's steady breathing were the only noises inside the vehicle. Half an hour passed before they reached the turnoff, a narrow gravel road that wound between thick clusters of pine and oak. Harris slowed, headlights sweeping across the forest like searching eyes. "Another mile," he said. Rook's head lifted suddenly. His ears turned toward the driver's side, nose twitching. A low rumble started in his chest. She felt the hair on her arms rise. "What is it, boy?" The dog's gaze locked on the darkness outside the window, his body leaning forward slightly. Kemp twisted in his seat, scanning the tree-line. "I don't see." A flash. It was faint, but unmistakable, a quick glint of reflected light deep between the trees, like moonlight catching on glass. Harris swore under his breath and pressed the accelerator. The SUV bounced over ruts, gravel spraying under the tires. Eyes open. Rook's growl didn't fade. He shifted position, now facing the rear window. She turned to look, and her stomach dropped. Headlights. Distant, but closing fast. "How the hell?" Kemp started, but Harris cut him off. "He's been waiting for us to move." The headlights disappeared briefly as the road curved, then reappeared even closer. "Hold on," Harris said, his tone sharp. He took the next turn hard, the SUV sliding slightly before regaining traction. The road narrowed further, the trees closing in overhead. The headlights behind them vanished again, but she knew better than to think they were gone. Lily's voice was tight. "He's playing with us." Her grip on Rook's harness tightened. Not for long. They reached the safe house, a small, single-story cabin with boarded-up windows and a reinforced front door. Harris pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. "Move." They got out quickly, Rook hitting the ground first, scanning the surrounding darkness. The cold air bit hard against exposed skin, each breath visible in the beam of the porch light. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of dust and stale air, but it was solid. Harris locked the door behind them while Kemp swept the rooms, checking closets, windows, and the short hallway leading to the back. Clear, Kemp said after a moment. They settled Lily in the small bedroom farthest from the front of the house. She sat on the bed without removing her coat, Rook lying down across the threshold like a sentry. It was quiet for a while. Too quiet. Then Rook's head came up, ears sharp. He stood, his nose working the air toward the ceiling. She frowned. "What is it?" He moved to the hallway and stopped directly beneath the narrow attic hatch. His body stiffened. Harris joined them, following her gaze upward. "You've got to be kidding me." Rook didn't move, didn't bark, just stared at the hatch the same way he had in the old farmhouse. And then, faint but clear, a small voice from above, "Don't let him in." The three of them stood in the hallway, their eyes locked on the attic hatch as the words faded into the silence. Harris was the first to move, stepping back toward the bedroom. "Kemp, keep her in there." Door closed. "Rook stays with us." Lily's voice trembled from the doorway. "Don't open it." Harris met her gaze. "We have to." The girl shook her head quickly, backing toward the bed. "That's where he goes when he's waiting." Her words made the air feel heavier. Kemp guided her back inside and shut the door. Rook didn't follow, his place was under the hatch, his eyes never leaving it. She unclipped his leash. "Easy," she whispered, though she knew he didn't need the reminder. Harris reached for the pull cord hanging from the hatch. The string swayed slightly, as if the air above had shifted. He stopped for just a moment, his eyes scanning the ceiling before he yanked it down. The wooden ladder unfolded slowly, each joint creaking in the quiet. A faint draft rolled down from the opening, colder than the rest of the house, tinged with the smell of dust and something faintly sour. Rook took one step up the ladder, then stopped. His nose twitched rapidly, head tilting slightly. "You smell him?" Harris asked quietly. Rook didn't react to the voice, just kept testing the air. Then he froze again, the way he had in the farmhouse attic, his gaze locked forward. She swung her flashlight beam into the opening, dust dancing in the cone of light. Old boxes, cobwebs, and a slanted roof lined with rotting insulation came into view. At first, nothing moved. Then, a scuff, faint but deliberate, from the far corner. "Identify yourself," Harris called up. Silence. He started up the ladder, shotgun slung across his chest. She followed a step behind, Rook coming up with them. The dog's nails clicked against the wood before his paws touched the attic floor, and then he was moving ahead of them, low and deliberate. The beam of her flashlight swept across stacks of furniture draped in yellowed sheets. The shapes they made in the dark were almost human, hunched, slouched, but too still to be alive. Rook's head snapped toward the corner. His growl rolled through the space, deep enough to make her chest vibrate. The light caught it then, a figure crouched low, face partly hidden by a hood. "Stand up," Harris ordered. The figure didn't move. She took a step forward, her beam narrowing on him. The hooded head turned just enough for her to see a grin, small, cold, and deliberate. Then he spoke. "You brought her here." It wasn't a question. Rook surged forward, stopping just short of him, his teeth bared. The man didn't flinch, just looked past the dog, as if Rook wasn't even there. "She doesn't belong to you," Harris said, stepping closer. "She doesn't belong to you either," the man replied. His voice was calm, even, like they were discussing something mundane. Her flashlight beam caught something glinting in his hand, small, metallic. Not a gun. Not a knife. A key. The man's grin widened. "She locked it, but I can always open it." Harris's voice was hard. "Drop it. Now." For the first time, the man's gaze shifted to Rook, who had inched closer, the growl never leaving his throat. The man's eyes narrowed. "Call him off." "Not happening," she said. The man tilted his head. Then you'll see what happens when you make me wait. Without warning, he dropped low, slipping behind a stack of boxes. Harris lunged forward, but the man moved fast, faster than they expected. By the time they rounded the stack, the corner was empty. Where, she started, but then she saw it, a small hatch in the floorboards, standing open. Harris cursed. Goes to the crawlspace between the walls. They heard it then, the faint thud of movement in the walls, heading toward the back of the house. Rook barked once, sharp and explosive, before spinning and bolting back toward the ladder. Rook was already halfway down the ladder by the time she reached it, his body moving with sharp, efficient purpose. Harris followed fast, his boots thudding against the wooden rungs. She brought up the rear, swinging down into the hallway just as Rook's paws hit the floor and he lunged toward the back of the house. Block the exits. Harris barked into his radio. From the bedroom, Lily's voice rang out, high and panicked, "He's here." She yanked the door open to see Lily pressed into the far corner, eyes wide. "Where?" The girl pointed toward the wall beside the bed. "In there. I can hear him." It was faint, but once she listened, she heard it too, the soft scrape of something moving behind the plaster, between the narrow space of the inner and outer walls. Harris's jaw tightened. He's using the crawlspace. Leads to the back door. Rook pressed his nose to the wall, his breathing quickening. Then he bolted from the room, following the sound through the hallway toward the kitchen. His nails clicked against the floor, his tail stiff and straight like an arrow. They followed at a run, the air in the house feeling thicker, heavier with each step. In the kitchen, Rook skidded to a stop by the pantry door. He shoved his head against the bottom seam, growling low. Harris yanked the door open, shelves of dusty cans and glass jars lined the inside. But at the back, a narrow panel stood ajar, revealing a pitch-black gap. "There," Harris said. Rook pushed forward immediately, but Harris held him back. "Not yet. Kemp, cover the back exit." A muffled bang came from deep in the crawlspace, followed by the sound of quick movement, then silence. "He stopped," she said. Harris nodded grimly. "He's listening." For a long moment, no one moved. The only sounds were the ticking of an old wall clock and the faint rustle of something settling in the house's bones. Then Rook's ears pricked sharply. Without warning, he lunged into the crawlspace, Harris right behind him. She followed, crouching low, her flashlight beam slicing through the dark. The air in there was colder, damper, smelling of old wood and soil. Narrow beams crisscrossed above them, forcing them to duck. Rook moved like a shadow ahead, his body twisting easily through the tight space. Somewhere ahead, a faint scrape, and then a shift of light. "There!" Harris called. The man was crouched near the end of the crawlspace, one shoulder wedged against a panel that led outside. His head turned toward them, that same cold grin flashing in the flashlight beam. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice low and calm. Rook's growl filled the cramped space, his teeth bared. The man's eyes flicked to the dog. "Call him off, or he's going to get hurt." "You're not in a position to negotiate," Harris said. The man's grin didn't fade. "You think you can protect her forever?" "She'll come back to me." "They always do." "Not this time," she said sharply. In one swift motion, the man shoved the panel outward and slipped into the night air. Rook lunged after him, Harris swearing as they followed. They emerged into the cold backyard, the frost crunching underfoot. The man was already halfway to the treeline, moving fast. "Rook, go," she commanded. The dog shot forward, a dark streak across the silvered grass. His paws hit the ground in a steady, pounding rhythm, his body low and fast. The man glanced back, and that was his mistake. Rook was on him in seconds, not attacking but blocking his path, standing broadside with his head low, growl sharp and constant. The man stopped, chest heaving, eyes darting for another escape route. Harris closed in from behind, shotgun raised. "It's over," Harris said. The man's gaze shifted past them toward the house, toward the faint outline of Lily watching from the bedroom window. And then he smiled. The grin on the man's face lingered, like he knew something they didn't. The cold air hung heavy between them, the frost crunching faintly under Rook's shifting paws as the dog kept himself between the man and any path to the house. Harris didn't lower the shotgun. "You're done. You're going to turn around, lie down on the ground, and you're not going to move." The man's eyes flicked to Harris, then back to her. "You really think she's safe just because I'm not in that house?" "You won't be anywhere near her again," she said, her voice steady even though her pulse was pounding. The man's smirk widened. "You can't watch her forever." Rook took a half step forward, his growl rising in pitch. The man's eyes snapped to the dog, a flicker of something past there, not fear exactly, but recognition that this wasn't a line he could cross. "You call him off," the man said. "You take one step toward that house, and he won't stop," she replied flatly. For the first time, the man hesitated. His gaze swept the yard, the frost-glittered grass stretching to the dark tree-line, the house standing silent behind them. Harris stepped in closer, the muzzle of the shotgun fixed on center mass. "On the ground. Now." The man let out a slow exhale, his breath misting in the frigid air. Then, deliberately, he lowered himself to his knees. "Face down," Harris ordered. The man didn't argue. He lay flat, hands out to his sides. Rook stayed planted at his shoulder, the deep rumble in his chest unbroken. She stepped forward, cuffing him quickly while Harris kept the shotgun trained. As the metal clicked around his wrists, the man spoke in a low voice meant only for her. "This isn't over." She tightened the cuffs just enough to make her point. "It is for you." Harris hauled him to his feet, walking him toward the driveway where the backup unit's headlights were just appearing through the trees. As soon as they were far enough, Rook turned, trotting back toward the house without needing a command. She followed, the cold stinging her cheeks. Lily was still at the bedroom window, her hands pressed to the glass. When she saw them coming, her shoulders sagged, and she stepped back. Inside, Kemp was waiting by the door. "You got him?" "He's on his way to holding," Harris said. "Let the sheriff know we'll need someone posted with her for the next few days until we find out how deep this goes." She knelt beside Rook, running her hand down his side. His muscles were still taut, but his eyes were calmer now. He leaned into her touch for just a second before moving to sit in front of Lily's bedroom door. When she opened it, the girl stepped forward immediately, wrapping her arms around Rook's neck. The dog stayed perfectly still, letting her press her face into his fur. "You stayed," Lily whispered. Rook blinked slowly, his head resting gently against her shoulder. "Yeah," she said quietly. "All night. Just like you asked." Outside, the red and blue flashes faded into the distance, swallowed by the dark line of trees. Inside, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the steady, even breathing of the dog who had refused to leave his post. For the first time since they'd found her in that attic, Lily's voice carried no fear, just quiet certainty. "He can't find me now." And for the first time that night, she believed it.